Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Eli Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome, Basya.
Thank you so much for having me, Eli. It's
Cool.
good to be here.
So I'm sitting with Basya Kovacs, a transformational coach from Passaic, Clifton, New Jersey. You and I were introduced by Galia Fenster. So talk about that.
Yeah, so Galia has been a really good friend of mine, and he's, I call him a friend first, but I actually think he's my Rebbe. So I was listening to his podcast or whatever you want to call it, his daily teachings for about 2 years before I actually met him, and I was struggling at the time with different things in my life, and just normal things, marriage.
This is going back how many years?
This is going back, I would say, about 4 or 5 years ago or so.
Pre-COVID.
Yes. Or around then.
Got it.
And struggling with a whole bunch of things. I think that's how long. I don't know the time frame.
Yes.
And I was listening for a while, and a lot of what he was speaking resonated with me to the point where I call myself Breslov at this point, even though I don't really have Hasidic blood at all. And some of the things that he said just felt like they were just speaking right to me, and actually ended up changing my life in a really important and big way. And so I scheduled some time to meet with him. He has this option to book a couple minutes with him. And when I booked a couple minutes with him, and we ended up talking for a while, and he ended up being more of a mentor to me, and I ended up on his show, and later on he introduced me to you. So here we are.
So what were some of those messages that resonated?
Okay, we're going right in there, aren't we?
In there, yeah.
We're going right in there. So all my life growing up, I was told that men's role is learning Torah and women's role is tznius. Like, this was just like a resonating message, and I didn't hear much else. I'm like summarizing, but
yes.
But one of the things he said was like, the women's role or the women's job is to handle her speech, which I had never heard, and he brought Kabbalistic sources, and he brought his, Rabbi Nachman sources about how a woman's tikkun, or, a woman's tikkun hamidot is to handle what comes out of her mouth. And I was like really surprised by that. I'd never heard it. And he brought a source, so it sounded legitimate. And I realized, like, oh my God, I have work to do about the way I speak to my husband, people, I had been working on my marriage at that point, but I had been kind of noticing all the flaws in my husband, which I think is very common, and kind of wishing they would change, and then sort of like wishing that I can change how I feel about him. And then, but when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, I have to work on that. Like, I'm just going to laser focus on being much more careful about what comes out of my mouth. That was one massive change that really shifted the dynamic, and then just changed the course of my relationship, my marriage. Another huge thing was his emphasis on personal prayer and hitbodedut and gratitude, and I took that to heart, and I actually started a practice of hitbodedut, and I have not missed a day since, I think, 2.5 years or so. So, and these two things, and there were other things also, but these messages actually were the most impactful.
That's pretty incredible to have that kind of impact. I'm sure it
I was looking,
should be nice for Galia to hear that.
I was looking for it. I needed it. It was like the right person at the right time. And now when I go and do my hitbodedut and I go into my state of gratitude, one of the things that I'm grateful for is Galia. I mean, not things, but people, and a couple other people along the way.
Can you add more color to what you mean by the way a woman speaks? Are you saying complaining?
I don't actually even remember what he was saying, but what I took about it was that women can be overwhelming. What I took from it is women can be overwhelming to men, and too many words and critical words. I think mostly just criticism. The four horsemen, the Gottman four horsemen that can destroy a marriage, and one of the big ones is criticism. And just the things coming out of my mouth, just to be more sensitive. And the funny part, or it's not actually funny, but the interesting part is that I am an incredibly sensitive person to everybody in the whole wide world, but I think people can relate to this, is that when it comes to our nearest and dearest and closest, that's when it can be the most challenging. And so I realized I was pretty critical, and I was playing a big part in my own misery. I was being critical, and I was playing part in not being, not feeling like I'm happy in my relationship.
So how does that change internally, and how did that change your relationship?
So
Meaning in practice, what did that?
First of all, it got me to shut up, and that was like a big plus.
Oh, so it's just don't say anything.
Yeah, because I would become critical before I even was able to go inside, like boom, and then it's so fast before I could realize like, hey, nothing actually happened. He's just a human being. He didn't mean anything by it, and maybe there's something coming up for me that I need to explore. It would be like too late. It would just the words would come out of my mouth, and that was I think that's common. I think that a lot of people can be critical, and a lot of times that criticism is coming from a place of their own fears or unsureness, or it can go really deep, but it shows up just as words. And so just by cutting that off, it's not that I was repressing what I needed to say. I actually was silencing myself so that I can pause for a couple of minutes and actually go inward and think about like what's actually going on in this dynamic. Do I even need to say this? Do I even really feel this mad at him, or is it actually just bringing up some kind of fear or bringing up some kind of worry, or or something that's going on for me, that it's my trigger, and so then it's it's my work.
At some point in time, does it shift to different kind of speech?
Yeah, well, totally. I mean, once you stop this critical dynamic, right? Once you stop this critical dynamic, so you have the option of talking softly. You have the option of realizing that you weren't even actually accessing the emotion that you thought you were. So you think you're accessing annoyance or anger or frustration, when actually what's happening is that there's something a lot more, soft and tender and vulnerable there that doesn't want to be accessed because it's more painful. And getting annoyed is really easy because you're the problem, and
right.
Getting critical is really easy because you're the problem, right? And feeling my fears and feeling my insecurities, or feeling my like if I tell you, why are you doing it that way, right? I might really be saying, I feel a loss of control here, and it scares me, right? If you're not doing it my way, I feel a loss of control, and it scares me. And now there's fear, and fear is nobody likes that. So I'd much rather you just be the guy who doesn't know how to do
right.
whatever you're doing, right? So by monitoring my words and pausing them, I would be able to realize that I don't actually even have to say this. Nothing actually happened, and he didn't even do anything wrong, and I can just go and do my work.
As a result, did anything change? I'm sure something changed in your marriage because you just removed the criticism, but did anything change with your husband?
Yeah, he didn't need to change. He was really fine. I mean this sincerely. It was, there was some dynamic that shifted as I became more vulnerable and able to share, like, oh, I just get scared, or I just get worried, or I get, I feel this loss of control, and I feel helpless, or I feel worthless, or I don't feel like I'm being a good wife because I didn't accomplish it and you were able to do it, or whatever it is. He was able to see that more, that softer, more tender side of me, and able to support it. And I think he always would have if it had shown up. It's
right.
just that, then because that came out of me, that that created like a really beautiful dynamic together. But he was there.
Did other things change his life? Like, did he start making more money? Did he?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I think he just started feeling really happy, like really, really good. He was always happy. He's a happy guy, and he's a peaceful person, and he's a loving person. But I think that he was able to use all those parts instead of using the part that's like, okay, don't lash back at your wife. Don't, kind of just hold it together, try to understand her, try to understand where she's coming from. So he's not using any of that energy. It's not wasting energy in sort of like navigating or managing me. He started working out a lot, which is great. So I guess he had a lot of extra energy, and that's a big plus. So yeah, it's been incredible. Just amazing. We've traveled more together, and we've done a lot. We've traveled as a family together more, and just incredible changes that are powerful and real. And the connection is so much deeper. But it was because I had to do the work.
Right.
It was.
The reason I ask is because I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, I came across a post on Instagram that said something to the effect of life hack: get a wife who builds you up.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe I totally believe that, and I think that there's Kabbalistic ideas of that also, which is that the woman is the mekabel and the man is the noten, and if you're not being mekabel because you're too busy criticizing, you're actually cutting off the shefa, right? So we're supposed to be the receivers, and the men are meant to be the givers, and it doesn't mean that it's not a give and take. It's actually receiving and giving is actually two sides of the exact same coin, right? If I give you a compliment and you say nothing, right? So I feel like garbage. Or if I give you a compliment and you receive it kindly, you did the same kindness to me as my compliment, right? So it's just who initiates.
There were two gifts,
right? So there were two gifts. It's just about who's initiating, right? So, but if it's cut off in any part of that cycle, then it actually blocks the flow of shefa and abundance from above. And so, to put it much more simply, get a wife who builds you up, right? Create that cycle where the husband gives and the wife receives, and this might sound old-fashioned, right? But the man, provides or takes care, and the woman receives that. And I think the way that a man is built up is through appreciation, right? Appreciation for all that. You could tell me if I'm wrong, and and then creating that cycle, and that actually brings down the shefa and the abundance and all that. So it's a life hack, yeah. or it's Judaism, or both.
No, I think it's true. I think men need receptivity on the other end.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes a man is doing his best. And it doesn't mean there's no room for feedback or change. It just means that net a guy is usually doing his best. Okay, like this is the best I can do.
Yeah.
And when it's not received, or this is the best I can do at this time.
Yeah.
And if it's not received, then the man completely loses energy.
Yeah, because if it's not received, it doesn't flow. It's like stuck. Like you don't want
Correct.
that, so then now what? Like it's so easy to see how it just blocks that flow. And I think also a man, a woman wants to feel taken care of, I think. And again, we're generalizing. It might sound old-fashioned, but it is, I think most people will, even feminists might agree that it's true. But a man wants to provide and feel like he is taken care of, that, right? That he's being appreciated and he's being valued, and that he's doing a good job making his wife happy, right? And so that cycle is like necessary on both ends. And if it's being blocked with criticism or with lack of receptivity, it'll block money flow. It'll block, Galia talks about this all the time, right? It'll block money flow, and it'll block joy, and it'll block the shechina in the house and all of that, just from not being able to receive, or by not even having gratitude or appreciation for that. Yeah.
Yeah, what do they say? What you appreciate appreciates, right? When you show appreciation,
I
it
never heard
appreciates.
that one. That's good.
Yeah, it appreciates in value.
Yeah.
For example, if a guy buys a woman a gift, buys his wife a gift, and there's some sort of sense that, that wasn't enough.
Right.
It's unlikely to.
Yeah, he's just going to shut it down. I've seen this in people that I'm close to, where the guy actually bought gifts for the wife, and the wife was not so happy, or like said no thank you, or didn't appreciate it, and he just gave up and stopped buying gifts completely. And then this person actually came to me and says, my husband never buys me anything. I'm like, tell me more.
Yes.
There's always a reason, because men are designed to want to give, to give and to see their wife's face light up, and to see their appreciation. They're designed to. So if it's shut down, it's usually because she shut it down.
I've experienced
I hate to
that.
say it, but I'm not wrong, am I?
No, I've experienced it, not in a direct way, but there was an incident years ago where I wanted to buy my wife something, and she's like, well, I had my eye on something else. And just that, it was small. It wasn't like she was saying, no, I don't want it, but I think it was a ring, and she's like, oh, I had my eye on these earrings. And the way I experienced that was as
rejection.
Total. Like, you don't want this.
Right.
And it turned me off from this gift and other gifts for a while.
Yeah, and I'm on the other side of that, and it happens to be like, it might have been a really off-base gift. Like, I'm thinking back to like some pajamas that I really didn't like that I got, that I was like, so like, why would you buy that for? Like, so not cool about it. And to my husband's credit, he just kept going. He can handle the rejection. He just kept going, which is really cool. That's why I'm saying, like, when I started to do the work, like, he was already he was already in the cycle and in the flow, and I was the one blocking it. I needed to unblock myself.
Right. Yeah, I used to do these short little podcasts, like 5-10 minute ideas, and I did one on your man is successful. Your man is as successful as you make him feel, I think, or as and your wife is as beautiful as you make her feel. right?
I like
those,
that. I like that.
The other side of that.
I went down that road a little bit of like, it's really important to make my husband feel masculine or manly, right? That was part of the beginning of my journey, but it got so much deeper. Like what ended up happening was I don't need to make him feel anything. I need to actually feel that he's taking care of me. Like it's not that I need to make him feel, right?
Right.
If I feel taken care of by him, right? Because let's talk about manifestation, right? Where you're at is what you attract, right? And so if I'm like, grumpy and disgruntled and feeling like life is unfair, but I'm trying to make him feel like the man, it doesn't have the same effect as if I actually can find all the ways that he is actually stepping up as a man. Even if I don't love every single thing, I can stop looking at the things that I don't like and start noticing, all the ways that he is providing and that he is taking care of and that he is making me feel taken care of. And just really look at those and focus on them. They're not fake, they're real, and then manifest more, and then you can manifest more of that. So I actually shifted from making him feel to actually making myself realize. I keep lists, keeping lists of all the things. And it brings us right back to the same place that I landed with Galia, which was the gratitude, right? Meaning when I started doing the daily practice of Hitbodedut, the reason it changed me so much was because I started with gratitude every single day. And so my whole world just shifted into a place of just noticing the good. And that was the same thing that happened in my relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been, I think my experience in my marriage is, or really going back to when I met my wife, is like I'm a product of her.
Yeah.
Right, so to speak. Like who I was a completely different person.
Yeah.
When I met her, emotionally, financially, everything, I was completely different.
Yeah.
And in many ways, she built me up tremendously.
It's amazing.
I'm
I'm inspired. I would love. Would you share more, like who you were before and who you were after?
I mean, some of it I have shared in terms of addiction. I've shared a lot of those aspects of my life.
In terms of just financial success or other
I wasn't business at the time, but even though I was in business and I was doing okay, but it didn't penetrate to me.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything that, there was like this money that was made and my responsibility was to give it to people.
Right.
It wasn't,
Right.
I wasn't abundant in any way. I wasn't.
Right. I understand. Like it didn't change you internally in a positive way, like to have this abundant mindset.
Right.
It was just like work and like.
There was business, there was money that was there, and it was okay.
Yeah.
So I'll move it in this direction or move it in that direction. Yeah. But in terms of me feeling that, like one of the things, for example, first I didn't feel like I deserved any of the money that I made.
Yeah.
So, like the way I spent or the way I lived, it didn't translate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she encouraged me to, amongst other things, to
feel that worthiness.
Right, and I fought it in different ways. Like at first it's like, oh, you're just a spendthrift, or you just like,
throwing money around.
And then it took me a little while to realize that no, when she traveled alone, she was sleeping at her sister, and when we traveled together, that's when she was pushing me to. And when I was traveling alone, she was pushing me.
She really wanted you to enjoy it, and she wanted you to take.
She really wanted me to feel it.
She wanted you to feel
take it in, like absorb it. Like, yes, you deserve this, you've earned it. But in many other ways also. I mean, emotionally, I was 90% dead for sure.
Yeah.
When I met her, so I think that. I think women could take a little bit more responsibility for the man in front of them.
Yeah, I see this a lot. I have a lot of female clients or women who come to me with a list of complaints about their men, like a real long list, and he's not being faithful, and he's looking at his phone or I suspect that he's not being faithful, or he's looking at his phone all the time, or he's addicted to the phone. He doesn't pay any attention to me, and a list of complaints out the door, and I don't want to invalidate any of those. They're all extremely painful and real, but I'm usually not working with the spouse. I'm usually working with the woman, and what we want to do is not blame the victim, but ask, what's the dynamic that's going on in my relationship, and can I shift something in myself that can end up shifting the dynamic, right? Not trying to change him or control him, and we can't. It doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't work anyway. But is there anything that we can kind of go inward and kind of shift on our own in the dynamic? And I do think that just just realizing where we're coming from, women, right, is oftentimes, like we said, we want to be taken care, feel like we're being cherished and taken care of. And if we have sensitivities, if we have childhood trauma, if we have, past experiences that make us, super sensitive to it, so we may be having level 10 reactions to a level 1 offense, right? Or right, we may be right, and so now we're creating drama or clinginess or mistrust or all of that, which actually has an effect on the man. We don't live in a bubble, right? And so the guy might be wanting to just have a few minutes peace or shut down, or is not finding you to be a nurturing, place. And so there's a dynamic there, right? And so kind of going inward and saying, what's coming up for me when there's, right, when my husband looks at his phone, let's say, right? So we're sitting together, we're on a date, or we're going for coffee, and he checks his phone, and now I'm like, right, mortally wounded. So let's call it a level 1 offense, right? And so, I might feel like a little prick, right? But if I'm feeling like a jab, that's usually because I have something going on for me that's like kind of waiting to come up and be healed. And it's a great place to go inward. Like we get insight from our outside, right? So that triggered me at a level 10. That's probably because I have some sort of rejection from my childhood or from my past that needs to be explored, and it's actually showing up in my marriage and creating a dynamic in my marriage. And we can leave the husband out of it, we can leave the dynamic out of it, and just go inward over there.
Right.
Yeah.
There is a possibility. I've thought before that whoever ended up with my wife would have ended up like me. Right?
Interesting.
I don't know if that's right. And in some ways,
she might be. I've never met her. She might be just super cool and being able to like hold anybody. Hold space for any. I don't know.
No, I'm not saying she's super cool. I'm just saying that I think that very often the man is a product of the woman. That's all. Like
there's definitely like backing for that in Jewish sources, like the idea of like had Rachel married Esav would have been. Right, Esav would have been Yaakov. Right. The idea that Yaakov was Yaakov because he married Rachel and Leah, but Esav had that same potential too, but he didn't have that advantage. Right.
No, I think that when there's an opportunity to recharge for a man, right? They're going out, and women and men have very different roles, and obviously a woman can step into a masculine role and a man can step into a feminine role. But in general, the man, right, as being provider and protector, is dealing with the outside world a lot, whatever that means. And the woman is often dealing with the internal world. So the man is going out there fighting a battle, whatever that is, trying to make money or trying to...
Hunting the deer. So
whatever it is, or creating a purpose for the family, whatever it may be, right? There's something that he's venturing outside of the four walls of the home in order to create. Obviously, you do some of that with your work and even a podcast like this, but
it's still that same dynamic where like the husband is the provider and the protector, and I think different women, women do work, and it could be for financial reasons, or it could be because they have special, talents or strengths that need to be utilized. But the dynamic, is that classic traditional dynamic is something. I think ideal. There's something to it. Yeah.
So when the guy is coming back home, right? So after whatever that is, there's a depletion of energy, right? He's used energy. And when he comes back home and there's an opportunity to recharge, then the next day he goes back, he's a much more fierce warrior.
Yeah.
If when he comes home, he's not getting plugged in, he's getting drained even more.
Drained even further.
Yeah, then it definitely makes I'm not putting all the responsibility on the woman, certainly not. If I'm talking to men, I'm coming from that perspective, but there is... each person can look at the world completely from their dimension.
It always takes two to tango, right? And it takes two to tango, but the idea is that if one person, if there's one in this dynamic that has, I guess, a bigger role in shaping it, it would be the woman. I think it would be the woman. She has the bigger power over the helping create the man, right? Like Isha Kshera Oseratzon Bala. I don't know the exact definition of that, but it's the idea is that she can create him. She can do something for him that can make him, have a greater ratzon or a greater shefa or a greater something that doesn't necessarily work in reverse.
In the reverse.
Yeah.
I hear that. I had this thought experience at one point. So I don't know if you've heard this paradigm, but of the idea of like an animal, a man, and an angel, right? That a man or human, right?
Yeah.
Both man and woman come into the world and can kind of be either one of those three,
Yeah.
right? We can follow our base instincts,
Yeah.
become an animal,
Right.
Which animal is not good or bad. An animal is just driven by survival
Right.
completely.
Programmed.
Can ascend to the level of human,
right?
Which a human is at the dimension of free choice.
Yeah.
That's the distinction of a human versus either the animal domain or the angel domain. Angels don't have free choice either. And then eventually can ascend to the level of angel in the sense that they're
the level of angel, right? Not the formation of angel, which is the same as animal, which is pre-programmed.
Right. Where at the level of angel, he's choosing the higher choice always.
He's using his spirit, right? He's going to his spiritual self, not his base self.
Right. So an experience I had was that a man is a human with 1 foot in the animal world.
Yeah.
And a woman is a human with 1 foot in the angelic world. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So I'll kind of support the argument.
Yeah.
So when I say 1 foot in the angelic world, a woman doesn't completely have free choice the same way a man does. And I'll prove it to you. A woman can't walk away from her kids the way a man can walk away from his kids. A man can walk away. And I think in olden, like hundreds or thousands of years ago, if and said, okay, like I'm going to war or I'm having multiple families, this is not my primary family, and they'll walk away from their children. But for a woman to walk away from their children, there has to be something so incredibly unhealthy there just to be able to walk away. They don't really have a free choice.
They're bound.
Yeah, in some way.
Right.
So in some way they're, like what they say about an angel comes with, an angel has one job and can do that job and then goes back, it's another job and so on. So in some way a woman, as far as the child is concerned, is like an angel. Not really making a choice.
You're saying that the maternal instinct is like almost like pre-programmed and doesn't allow for free choice.
Yes.
But not like an animal instinct. It's
different.
It's a high-level instinct.
Right, because an animal instinct is survival.
Right.
But a mother is not
That's
survival.
That's a really cool way to think about it.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
I like that.
Okay, so now when a man meets a woman, so you have a woman who has 1 foot in the angelic realm. One of the things about angels is they can see.
Yeah.
So if a woman sees a man, the man himself has, no doubt by the time he's reached 25, has dealt, whatever marriage age is, 25, 30, 20, depending on the community, has maybe 40 in some communities.
Could be 18 and for my listeners. If we have my Hasidic listeners, it could be 18.
So even at that age, they've already begin to come to terms with their baser animal self.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, I'm really not in control of myself. And a man can feel that way.
Yeah.
And I think most men have experienced this where we feel completely demoralized by our baser instincts.
Yeah.
And saying like, well, I don't just mean sexually. It could be food-wise. It could be waking up whenever. It just realizing we have no control of this thing. It takes a while for a man to get control of the system, so to speak. So a man can get very demoralized and feel like, wow, I'm just a helpless animal.
Yeah.
And when a woman sees a man and says, I'm going to take a risk on you, they're seeing that this man can ascend to a human being with free choice and an angel. Yeah. And that changes a man when it says, okay, this woman believes in me, that I'm not this low-level animal, but I can actually become a human.
She brings him up.
Yeah, he feels in some way that she has seen it, therefore she believes it.
Yeah.
And then, okay, she sees it and she believes it, so now she's conveying this belief to me.
Yeah,
that's
like a really cool way to think about it. And that, there's also this idea of like Bina Yisera, right? Like the extra intuition that a woman has, and that might be that little piece that's like connected to the, right? Because we talk about this Bina Yisera, like what is Bina Yisera? So it's like Bina is more like an emotional like an intuitive knowing, right? But it might be that spirit, that like where does intuition come from? It's usually a spiritual
right, like tapping into a
collective spiritual field, or
right.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
I like it.
Right, straight ayahuasca experience, by the way.
Yeah, totally.
For what it's worth. I didn't say it at the beginning, but that
we could totally go into that conversation if you want to, but
I'll go wherever you want to go.
Oh, you're in charge.
No, certainly not.
Surprise me.
What?
Surprise me.
Okay, but let's see where to go from that. I don't want to get hijacked by ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is a spirit too that can hijack a conversation. So.
Yeah, and it's a female spirit, so she can totally hijack a conversation.
Yeah, so not necessarily want to go there. It feels like it would be a little bit of a hijack if we went there. So let's, I think, to continue down the path of bring us a little bit into your your story pre-Galia.
Okay.
How you grew up and who you were and...
Okay, so the interesting thing is that I grew up very differently than most of my clientele, I would say. I grew up in Chicago, one of 9 children, Kirov family, out of town, Chicago. So my father started out learning in Kollel for 10, 12 years, and then he started a Kirov organization, thank God, a very successful one. And our home was full of love and stress. A lot of kids, not a lot of money. So it was stressful, but it was a lot of love. And I think what came out of growing up in that home was a real passion to help people, and also for me personally, really not like, my parents are these amazing, incredible, inspired people who like live every single day inspired. Like if anybody lives their day like it's their last day, it's them. This is how they've lived their lives. And as a kid and as a teenager, I always felt like that's not me. That's not me. I just want to like rollerblade and run around, and and so I had this passion.
That is the service or the religion? Is not you?
The whole thing, the whole thing. I didn't really find myself as a teenager at all. Like I didn't really have any clarity on who I was. So I knew who my parents were, and I knew that they would like me to be, like them or similar. But I didn't really know who I was. And then but I did the system and kind of just went along with it, but with feeling a lot of angst. I also had an interesting relationship with God, which was that the chinuch that I got in school, I guess, or somehow was, a very scared version of God. And so it was like, I have to be perfect or I'm in big fat trouble. And I was always in big fat trouble anyway, as a kid, so I had this like fear of God, but I had a lot of like love for God. I just didn't think he loved me. Right. And so, I grew up hearing my parents explain Judaism and Torah and God, and so I knew that he was loving and kind and good, but I just felt kind of like bad, like I'm just doing it all wrong, and he must not love me, and he must not care about me, and so I kind of didn't connect with him on any level at all. I kind of was just like, don't call me to the principal's office, don't look at me, don't see me, like stay out of his way, and it was sad because I look back now and I feel so sad because I feel I have such a close relationship.
Do you have any sense of how you could have got that message if you describe your home as loving and describing a loving relationship with God?
I think it's my nature. The standard that I hold for myself, which is high, and maybe the standard that my parents held for me, which is high, and without ever. I also think that there's like a nature-nurture dynamic that goes on with every child that's important to talk about, where my parents were incredible and amazing, but I don't think that I was able to express myself to them. I wasn't able to like show them my flaws or show them my
right.
dark side. So I was showing up in a very perfectionist type of way, and again I think that's my thing. And I was also very, very sensitive to disappointing them or anything. So, but I wasn't talking about that. I was just kind of like, okay, so I'm not perfect, but I won't let you know, and I won't let you see that. And so I think it was mixed in with my relationship with my parents. But again, it wasn't my parents, it was my nature. My nature was to hold things in. My nature was to not want to bother people. My nature was to not want to trouble anyone with my
right.
inner angst. And so things that probably could have been resolved really easily, like finding out, like talking to my parents about these kind of things, probably could have really helped. But again, no regrets. I think everything unfolds perfectly, exactly as it's supposed to. But
no regrets for you because you can't change the past. But someone's listening who has a teenager.
Yeah, and so and I see this all the time with my clients. I'll talk about that next. But I think what it ended up for me is that I just ended up doing like a very surface, like this is what I got to do in Judaism so that I don't get like in deep, deep trouble from God. But like not feeling connected to it until much later on in life, where it was just like I'm something's got to change. Something's got to change. Like this paradigm of, you know, the man in the sky with the stick who's waiting to punish me, it doesn't even feel like it's Yiddishkeit. It feels like it's Christianity. But there was a part of me that was afraid to shift my, you know, belief systems.
What if you're wrong? Then you get punished.
What if I'm wrong? Exactly. Like, I really want to be right, but what if I just want to be right because that's like the lazy way out, right? And so, right, I really think I'm right, but what if I'm just being, you know,
and how did
lazy
you
or scared? Through my,
how'd you take the risk?
Through my inner work, through my hitbodedut, through, you know, I'm kind of logical even in my emotional. So it was like, okay, here's the plan. God made Yom Kippur. He said he forgives us. So if he forgives us, I'm forgiven. And if he doesn't forgive me, I'm going to say, well, you said, right? Like, meaning, so, right. And then realizing, like, no, he created that because he loves us, right? And so, right, you say you love us. You say that you want to take care of us. I'm just going to, after 120, I'm just going to throw it back at you. And I'm just going to be like, well, you said so. And I just decided to trust you, right? And I remember where I was standing when I had these insights of, no, I'm just going to take the risk on trusting what God's been saying all along, which is, I love you and I forgive you and I care about you. And there's nothing that you can do that will make me stop loving you, and I'm looking out for you, and I'm, you know, and I just want you to have good. And I'd heard all that, but it just didn't go in because the fear piece was just like sort of blocking it. So I kind of just took away the fear, and it was like, oh no, I'm going to just bring this up to God after 120, and I'm going to be like, I took a risk, you know, I took a risk on trusting that you can love me, and through doing that, it was. I took the risk on then loving myself, because I don't think it's different. I think that anybody who feels loved by God can love themselves, and I feel and vice versa. You know, it's I believe it's one and the same. And so when you open up that, you know, that when it's not knowing, but when you integrate, like the atayadati, right? Like when you integrate what you've already heard, and you can feel God's love for you, then you start to have, you know, that love for yourself, and then religion becomes just ways of connecting to God and ways of, you know, expressing your love of God and joy for God. And so, like, all the pieces that were just not there just started coming together.
Have you heard of the concept that one of the roles, or maybe the primary role of a father, is that however he interacts, or however he leads his child to believe he operates, he's leaving the child with the idea of the way God operates.
Totally, except that in my case, it just didn't. And I do believe that to as a general extent, right? Meaning, if your father creates fear in the home, then you'll relate to God through fear. And if you're right, and if your father creates love and acceptance, then you'll relate to God through love and acceptance. Except I had loving and accepting parents. It was more that, well, I couldn't accept myself, and so I wasn't showing them myself in order to be accepted. Later on in life, when I was being more myself, or whoever I was at that stage, and I saw that my parents loved me anyway, you know, it's almost like when teenagers test their parents at the age of, I don't know, 9, 12, 15, 18, and they find out that their parents are still going to love them anyway, and it's actually very therapeutic and I think very healthy. I never did that. So, you know, it was almost like I just missed the chance on having access to, you know, my father and my mother as you know, role models for what Hashem is, even though it was right there. So, you know, and I think that is perfectly designed that way. Like, that's, you know, it's that nature and nurture that dynamic. I think it's the way I was created, as I keep things in, you know, I'm the oldest girl. I take care of other people. I don't put my problems onto people and things like that. And so it just kind of got missed, but it wasn't because of like a fear-based dynamic from
but sometimes there can be like an error of commission or an error of omission, meaning sometimes there could be a child, fear was put on them, and then another child, fear wasn't put on them, but fear specifically needed to be removed from them.
Yeah, that's also true. And I also think that there's the idea of intent versus impact. So, you know, I'm not going to talk about myself in this case, but it's important, like, to realize for people who are like kind of protecting their parents, or who say like, okay, my parents weren't any worse than anybody else's, that it's not about what the parents intended or what the parents did. It's about how you were impacted, right? And so we never have to blame parents, shame, you know, or throw parents under the bus, or feel disloyal when we're talking about our experiences. And I think this is really important because of the generational trauma and stuff. But it's what was the impact of your experience as a child, right? So it could be that a teacher said something about Hashem judging you, and it just like really resonated in a very deep way, and nobody did anything, and you wouldn't call it trauma, but it just like stuck, right? Or your parents might have said one or two small things that were sharp and harsh, and because you're super sensitive, you took it as like, okay, this is gospel truth, and it just impacted you on a deeper level. And so I see this with many people who had good childhoods and healthy upbringings, but there was impact from school or from home that went in deep. Nobody even knew, and nobody intended it, and had they known, they would have done it differently, but they carried it with them, right? And so it's not about the intention or what was done or the experience or the story, it was how it impacted me. And you'll see people who had so much trouble and problems and dysfunction in their childhood, but it didn't impact them as deeply.
Correct.
Right? And this is why we don't compare traumas either.
Yes. But trauma isn't always what happened to someone, it's also something that they needed that they didn't get.
Yeah, the omission, right?
Yes.
Right. So that's there's a piece there too, right? And so if somebody's not being noticed or taken care of, they might think of God as somebody who doesn't notice them or take care of them. Like
I think for parents who hear criticism from their children, they shouldn't feel too worried about it if they have children. Meaning if the children are criticizing have children, because then
they're going to find out.
Or if we don't already know that it's...
Yeah. I think that one of the hardest things for parents to accept is that they might have hurt their children, right? Especially good parents, right, who are trying to do the best they can, but then they find out that they didn't do everything right, and their child was impacted, and the child has a whole list of complaints about all the terrible things that the parents did for them. And as soon as that child grows up and has children of their own, number one, they start to understand how much their parents love them, always love them, usually, because of, unless there's real illness or sickness, because they see how much they love their own children, right? And number two is that when they start to mess up on their children, then they start to give their parents a little bit more bandwidth. There's almost that like crazy moment when kids or young adults realize that their parents are humans, just people, just people doing the best they can. But parents get really defensive about no, I didn't hurt you, I did everything right, and I was the perfect parent, because it's right. And that's, again, it's coming from fear, and it's coming from pain. Like, I don't want my child to be in pain. I don't like this. I don't like your story, because I don't like the fact that you were in pain, because I feel responsible for you. And
right.
So
The irony is
your story.
Right. The irony is, at that moment, the parent is not giving the child what they need.
All they need is validation.
Right. In some way, like validation, it can go away.
Yeah. Just tell me you messed up. Tell me that you, right? Just tell me you messed up, right? And that's I thank God I've been able to do that for my kids who are getting a little bit bigger now. Also, is I messed up. Like, I was young, I was trying the best I can. I never meant bad, but I see how it impacted you, so I messed up. Cool. We all do, and it's cool to be able to admit it. But yeah, not to take it personally when kids, speaking to all the parents out there, not to jump to defense, right? That defensiveness is a wall of protection against the pain. I don't want my kid to be in pain, so I don't want to just dismiss. I want to dismiss your story.
Right, and the other part of it is that often, by the time a child is speaking to their parents, they've already gone through.
Done some work.
No, meaning they've already gone through all of that in their head, meaning minimizing it, excusing it, putting it to the side.
Right.
My parents did the best they could. They've already said all of those things.
Right.
You're not adding any new information. And it took a while to get to the point that they say the relationship with their parent is important enough that they want to invest in it in this way. Right.
They've done the work they've done the work already. Yes, yeah. I think that so many of the broken relationships, like you see in all these Jewish magazines, the Ami and the Mishpacha, and it's talking about the toxic parent and cutting off and toxic and narcissist and all these things. And I think that it's just layers of, just protection, right? So a narcissistic parent is really just a fear-based parent, right? Fear of something, right? And then the codependent also, right? And we're talking about real human beings with real painful, hurting emotions, and if we can just sort of remove all these layers of, toxic, right? If we can remove these words like toxic or narcissist or, cutting them off and this and that, and just see that there's a person behind there, whether it's, right, even a teenager who's rebelling, they're coming from a place of just needing to not feel rejection or needing to fit in, right? And a parent who's being too harsh, they're just probably worried about your future. And a mother who's super critical, she might just be worried that you'll reflect poorly on, right? They're just coming from their own fears, right? Now, granted, adults should be taking ownership of what they throw out there into the world, but if we can just sort of see through a little bit of a softer lens of that people are mostly operating out of fear, pain, shame, guilt. That's most when they're operating harmfully.
Right.
That's usually where they're operating from.
Right. I had this thought once that, when it says honor your parents in Torah, it's kabed es avicha, right?
Yeah.
Kabed, the word also means like weight or heavy.
Yeah.
So like one way we honor it is by giving weight to the relationship with our parents, and not saying, "Oh, it doesn't matter. It's not a big deal."
Taking
it seriously.
Taking it seriously. Holding the weight of that, not just throwing it away.
Yeah, I think that for many children, we get to a place of my relationship with my parents aren't that important to me.
Yeah.
And maybe part of the instruction is, no, make it important.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when a child will come to their parent and say, hey, this and this happened when I was a kid and I want to discuss it.
Right.
The parent will dismiss it sometimes with this same text.
Right.
And say, well, how can you talk about me like that? The Torah says to honor me.
Right.
But maybe they are honoring you in that moment by bringing it up.
Bringing it up.
Maybe they are honoring the relationship.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. Meaning not the individual.
Yes.
But the relationship of father, the relationship of mother, by saying, okay, I value this relationship, so I'm bringing this challenge to you. I think that there are certain parents who've heard the complaint and rejected it, a number of times, and then at some point in time, the child stopped complaining, stopped communicating, stopped conversing, stopped talking with the parent, and the parent would give anything for the child to call and complain today.
Yeah.
So when the child is complaining, take it seriously. Sometimes all it can take is one comment,
right,
and it can be moved past.
I mean, that brings us to the we were touching on, which is the the generational trauma, and I see this with my Hasidic clientele, but it's I'm sure it's not unique to the Hasidic clientele, but there's a lot of just we're now in, like, I would say, third to fourth generation post-Holocaust, right? And so that, with a major generalization, that first generation was just in survival, right? Just in survival mode, and may not have effectively been able to come out of survival mode. And so they might have had to keep things very much locked in, and they might have had to do a lot of repressing of their emotions, or keeping their emotions locked down, because it really was way too big to actually feel for a lot of people. And then that next generation was born from a family that in a family that the emotions were not safe, right, and because they really weren't safe, right? And so this next generation, who's not going through the Holocaust, but they have parents who did, right, were raised in an environment that's saying emotions are not safe. They will, right, if you feel too much, it'll kill you, because that's really what the situation was, right? And if you have, right, any emotion, so be strong, be stoic, be tough, put a smile, do your thing, cook the kugel, bake the kugel, right? And the next generation was, whenever emotions came up, we're taught to keep it down or repress it. And this is a huge generalization, and I don't want to do a disservice to people who did heal and did not create this, but this is what I see is that next generation became a generation that actually did have emotions but weren't able to express it to the parents. And sometimes it was overt, right? Like, don't feel that way, you should just be happy to have food on the table. And sometimes it was covert, like, my parents are just silent, so I should be silent too, so then I shouldn't be, right? I should, either it's told you shouldn't be feeling this way, you should just be grateful to be alive or to have food on the table, or it was just unspoken, right? But it was like, this is not safe, right? And then the next generation is like, just, kind of like needing it but feeling guilty, right? And so, right, so there's like the repression, and then there's like the guilt for having other needs other than that, right? And and the biggest part of all is that like the rebuilding was so important, right? So it's like rebuild at any cost, and if there's any problems in the communities or anything, just keep it down.
It's straight survival mode.
We just go straight survival, and we're just rebuilding, right? And so problems can't be talked about, emotions can't be felt, problems can't be talked about, emotions can't be felt, and when emotions come up, they bring guilt and shame and right and all of that. And now here we are in generation 3.5 or whatever it is, which is, people in their 30s, 40s, 50, that are like, hey, like what was that in my childhood and what was going on there? And right, and I do have needs and I do have wants and I do have desires and I do and I didn't express them, and now it's like and now I'm 40 years old and I have a whole family, but all this stuff is coming up, and there a lot of times the relationship is tricky with their parents because of if they were raised in a way that wasn't particularly healthy.
Yeah, I think it says somewhere something to the effect of the missteps of man is like the consequences of it are suffered to the third and fourth generation.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that
I think that's it though. I think like
yes,
the rewards
correct.
go for 2,000, right? 2,000 generations, but like the missteps or the pains or it's just like
third
1,
and fourth
2, 3,
generation.
4. Yeah. So I think hopefully here we are. Like I think this is the healing generation, and
it definitely seems like it.
It seems like it to me too, and I see so much beauty and healing and so many different modalities that nobody even knew about 20, 30 years ago, like, inner child work and IFS work and,
yes.
and parts work and psychedelics and
Breathwork, yes,
and one breath work. There's so
Hypnosis,
many amazing modalities. And I think this is it. Like, here we are, we're healing, right? Let's not be mad at each other for not being perfect. Let's just kind of heal and elevate together.
Right. Now is the moment. Oftentimes we're looking at our parents' generation or their parents, but, they took a step forward from where they were, and the next generation took a step forward. And now it's
too close. But
now it's our job to take
now
a
it's
step
our job, and I think we're doing it. I see so much, awesome, just validating people's experiences and accepting people, even with like, you brought out things about addiction and things like that didn't need to live in secrecy anymore, and just validating that. We're as a collective Am Yisrael, like we do need healing, but that also means that we need to come out and talk about our struggles. And again, it doesn't mean people get worried like, oh, everybody's blaming their parents, everyone's cutting off their parents. It's not necessary, because we're talking about impact. We're not talking about blame, right? So I don't have to blame anybody. I was impacted a certain way, and I don't even have to cut off anybody, right? And if I might have to talk to them a little bit less while I do my healing work so that they're not so triggering, that still doesn't mean I have to necessarily cut them off, right? But just this idea of let's heal without blaming and without throwing anybody under the bus, just in talking about how I was impacted and what my inner experience is and what I'm carrying and how that's being triggered and showing up in my my day to day.
Do you feel like healing scares a lot of people?
We have a word for it. We call it healing, like the healing. Like in the Hasidic world, there's a lot of like healing going on.
Okay.
I think it's cool. I think people are doing it in different ways. There's people. I mean, I'm on a breathwork chat with 1,000 people. I'm on a psychedelics chat with 1,000 people. So in my world, and then I'm on a coaches chat with all different modalities and stuff like that. So in my world, all of this is just kind of super common and stuff like that. But yeah, I find that people, when I have a new client who comes in and they're kind of tiptoeing into my office and they're coming in with, maybe a food, an eating disorder or a relationship problem, and like they've never really explored this and they've never talked to anybody about it, and it's very, very new, and they don't even know about all these different modalities of healing, and it's just very refreshing to know that they're valid and right, and that other people are experiencing the same things, and that they're not crazy, and that there's really, really good help out there.
Right.
Yeah, so the cool thing would be if people can tell people that they, so in the psychedelics world, I think people talk, yeah, I tried ayahuasca, I tried wachuma, I tried this, I tried that. In the coaching world, also people talk. In the therapy world, and especially in the addiction world or things like that, there's still a lot more silence. And it's not as out there yet. And I think the more people talk about their healing journeys, the more safe they make it for other people to, talk
Right.
about talk about getting therapy and help. Normalize it. Everybody needs to do therapy. That's it.
Yeah, in the addiction world, obviously, a lot of it comes from the anonymous programs, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, so on. And that idea of anonymity, in my opinion, I mean, who am I to say, but it's the way I behave, is that the anonymity was taken a little bit too seriously. In the sense that, there's... my understanding of it is that the anonymity was meant for no one to be the poster boy or the poster child of addiction recovery.
As opposed to secrecy.
Exactly.
Got it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't think that anything great happens in secrecy. All of the problems that people are struggling with are relational problems, right? Meaning whether somebody has an addiction or I shouldn't say all, but right, everything is relational. Everything is about interacting with other people, and anything that's in secrecy is in aloneness and in disconnect, right? And so the more it's in secrecy and disconnect, the less we can heal. We heal by reconnecting. Right, trauma is trauma is a disconnect, right? And rough childhoods are a disconnect, right? Loneliness, unworthiness, not feeling safe, not feeling connected, right? If you've ever done inner child work or any IFS work, right, it's always about coming. The unburdening is always about coming to that part that was alone and scared or afraid, right, and just supporting it. Right, and just support, right, and just that support and that connection, whether it's coming from an older version of you or an outer support, and coming and supporting that inner child, right, is so healing, and that that aloneness is what the I think the foundation of the trauma itself, of the addiction itself, right? So the Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm not as familiar with it as you, but I do think that there needs to be,
Right, there have been some more and a lot of...
outward, people...
Yeah, certainly I agree with it because I do that, right?
Yeah.
Meaning I speak, and one way I honor the anonymity is by not mentioning the specific program I went to. I just say I was in 12 steps.
Yeah.
But there is basis for that, because anyone who understands addiction knows that there's always the possibility of relapsing or falling back.
Right.
So if someone is the poster child of Alcoholics Anonymous...
Right.
And everyone's looking up to them and saying, oh, wow, this is the guy who got sober from alcohol and this is the program he used.
Right.
20 years later, he relapses. Then it could hurt a lot of people negatively. So there is there is that aspect of it that's very important and has to be honored and respected. And then there's the other aspect, is that shame is an essential component, an ingredient of addiction. And when we speak about our stories, we can eliminate a lot of shame.
There's also the idea of just protecting the other people around you. Like even as I was getting on this podcast, I was like, how much do I want to share, or how much do I not want to share? Because I have a husband and children, and and even if I'm comfortable sharing, and I would like to share for the sake of the audience and people gaining from it, I care also about my family and about them not having shame,
Right.
or embarrassment or things like that. And I think that it needs to be honored and respected. But I think if we could just move towards the idea that many people are struggling with many things, and it's and it's okay, and you're valid, and you're not crazy, and there's and that people make sense, right? Our addictions make sense. Our food addictions make sense, right? If feelings are not safe, and I don't want to feel my feelings, and food is readily available, it makes sense. And if I don't have a way, right, if I don't have a way to emotionally regulate, or somebody to support me in my emotions, there's a great way to not feel. There's a great way to not feel, right? And then they build on themselves, right? And so all of our behaviors, whether they seem adaptive or maladaptive or productive or not productive, are always trying to serve us. Always.
Yes, I find that often, if we know enough about a person's story, we'll understand the place they're in. If it doesn't make it right, it doesn't make sense to us.
This is a line that we say in my house all the time. People make sense.
Right.
If I were you, I'd act just like you. If I had every aspect of your life, I'd act just like you. Right? People make sense. It doesn't mean that everything they do is helpful in the big picture, but it just makes sense. And
if you understand their pain, if you understand their experiences.
Right. And so I think that people think that the addiction is the problem. It's not, right? And people come into me thinking that the food is the problem and the food needs to be under control, and it's totally not. It's actually the solution, and it's semi-adaptive. It's not completely maladaptive, but it can get worse and worse, right? But not to see any of these outside surface things as the problem, right? They're not. It's the solution to whatever's needing to kind of come up or be healed or just be seen or unburdened.
Yeah, I've often thought that God is described as many things, but a common description is that He's truth.
Yeah.
Right. Hashem l'kech b'emes, God is truth, and also that God is rachamim, or we say kel malei rachamim.
Right.
He's merciful.
Yeah.
He's compassionate.
Yeah.
So is that a contradiction? Meaning, is compassion lying in some way?
Yeah.
And I've concluded that no, actually, if someone has the full truth,
then they
will, right, there will be compassion.
That's always the case in the inner work, like in the inner child work, right, or the parts work. When you take away the protectors and you go right, or even when you just understand what the protectors are trying to do, you feel let's say there's a part of me that's saying do drugs, right, but when I understand what that part's role is, right, and it's just trying to help me not feel that way. Now I have compassion towards that part that I hated, right, or the porn addiction, right. So
yes.
you might want to hate that part about you, but if you ask it what its role is, right, and it's just trying to help you survive, or it's just trying to help you feel like a somebody, or it's just trying to help you, right, it's almost right. If you go deeper behind like the surface, whatever pleasure it might be, is some, or it's just trying to fill an empty space inside of me that feels like it's going to drown me or
yeah, there are many things it could
be. Then we have compassion for even the part that does reckless or hurtful things. So right, like MS is MS, like the real, right, what it's truly trying to do. Then we have rachamim right in there. Yeah.
There's
like
an addiction.
It's not a contradiction.
Addiction writer's name is Lance Stodes. He has a number of books on addiction. The Heart of Addiction, 7 Steps to Break Free from Any Addiction. A couple of books. He's actually officially an anti-12-step guy.
Okay.
Even though I don't think he is. I think whoever told him about the 12 steps didn't explain it to him, so he thinks he's anti-12-step, and he's created an identity around being anti-12-step, so he kind of has to stick to it at this point.
Yeah.
Like Sam Harris is an atheist, but if you listen to Sam Harris's
he probably
mushroom trip,
right?
There's a video on a YouTube video, it says Sam Harris's mushroom trip.
Yeah.
And when he's describing that, he doesn't quite sound like an atheist, but he still considers himself an atheist.
Yeah, this is like when people say, "I hate," I don't believe in God. I don't believe in that God either. That's just that's just a made-up version or a Christian version, or what, right? If you don't believe in God, it's probably because you don't know who God is.
Right. It was introduced in a
It was introduced as like a man in the sky with an agenda,
right.
As opposed to like the creative force, a creative loving force, right? So you can say it's a creative neutral force, right? If you don't believe that it's like intrinsically loving, but it's really hard to leap into like atheism, right? Or to say you don't believe in God, but I think we digress.
It often takes a religious belief, which is why it's atheism.
Yeah.
Right, it's an ism.
Right.
It takes a religious, like its own religious belief to say no.
Yeah.
But anyway, Lance Stodes describes addiction as someone who's someone who's trapped under a rock.
Yeah.
Who's cutting off their arm to free themselves.
Yeah.
So to someone who's not seeing the full picture, they're saying, well, why are you cutting off your arm?
Yeah.
But you zoom out, you see their arm is trapped under a rock and it's keeping the rest of them there.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense why they're doing it.
Yeah.
Now, of course, they're not actually trapped under a rock. They just feel that way. So what can we do to help that person not cut off their arm?
Yeah, that's an interesting way. I gotta read up on that. But I like the parallel that you brought to like the atheism and the God, the God also, because that's I think a lot of people's misconceptions about God actually. This shame cycle that's in food addiction or in other addictions. I don't think that we can separate shame without bringing without somehow bringing our relationship with God into the mix, right? It's like we're told not to do these things, and now we're doing these things, and now we feel horrible, and we can't look at God. We can't look at God in the face, so to speak, right? And so it's not just about ourselves; it is about our relationship with God. And I think that having a more accurate version of a belief system of who God is can be very therapeutic. And so that's something I bring into my practice now too.
Yeah, I see myself on my own journey of healing, where I started, even though I started with, the first therapist I had was an Orthodox Jew, but because of the way he was trained, he stayed out of the spiritual domain. He just, cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever else it was, he didn't touch spirituality or where is God and all this.
Yeah.
One of the changes that I see going on in healing, especially with psychedelics and breathwork and a
Yeah.
lot of these, for lack of a better word, they're spiritual healing,
Yeah.
right? That's what it is.
That's all it is.
Is that it, I want to say imposes, but it brings that to the fore for someone and introduces healing in a very spiritual way where the relationship with God is completely...
Yeah, and then if you go back to like some of the classic, Tanya and Rabbi Nachman and all the the writings and stuff like that, it just, a lot of it just sounds a lot like modern day therapy. It is therapeutic, like it's in and of itself.
Oh, it's meant to be.
Yeah, right. It's meant to be, and now we're like coming back home to what we've always had in our in our tradition that was right there all along, but like just wasn't main. It wasn't as mainstream as I guess like the normal curriculum for a religious day school or whatever it is.
Throughout history, I mean, the Jewish leaders as healers.
Yeah.
It says that Avram had a stone around his neck, that people looked at it and healed.
Yeah.
And what does it mean? Presumably it meant physical ailments, spiritual ailments, psychological ailments, mental ailments, that people looked at it and healed. Like that's what he was a healer.
Yeah. And
in addition to a spiritual leader.
The breastplate, we're so used to all these just like stories and ideas that we don't connect to them so much spiritually. But if we just go back and reread it from a spiritual lens, everything is just like mind blowing actually, right? Like Har Sinai is like the highest spiritual consciousness, elevated experience, right? But we just think of it as like Vayichan Sham Yisrael Naged Har and then this, but like it was like a crazy out of body trip that now is starting to sound a little, now with all these different modalities and stuff, is starting to sound a little bit more relatable. Like when you learned it when you were little, it was like, okay, cool, that happened to them, like whatever. Right now it's like, oh, maybe I want some of that. Maybe we can do Har Sinai again, right? And that ish echad b'lev echad, like that, right? Each person is connected. Pretty much every single person on any spiritual, any medicine trip will have a moment where they feel the interconnectedness of all
everything.
Of everything.
Yes.
So there you have it, ish echad b'lev echad, right? Like it's all there. We just like skim through it and kind of miss it. But yeah, like so all the there's so much therapy and healing in the
100%. The Baal Shem Tov was healer. The Rambam was a doctor.
Yeah,
and
even halachic, even basic halachic things like the hilchot tefillah are actually just like how to go into a state of meditative consciousness, right? We just skim it over as just like, okay, here's what you do. Here's the halachos of davening. But if we read them, they're actually talking about how to get into a meditative, higher conscious state so that you can find yourself with a capital S and sort of connect it to it's das elyon, right? We're just like, okay, so you have to have kavana, whatever that is, and we just don't know. We're, I think, a little bit uneducated.
I hear that. Okay, we're getting educated now.
I know, I'm uneducated.
I felt that way. I felt that a lot of what was taught to me was very distant from what I'm now learning and appreciating and understanding.
I wonder if that's the way it's meant to be. Like everybody gets like their indoctrination, so to speak, right, when they're young, and so it's all there, and then they have to kind of find their way. And then I think it like behooves us to go back and like rediscover Judaism all over again, like as adults. And I think like God has it set up that He like pushes us in that direction, because I see that so many people who are having their healing journeys are also having their spiritual journeys and connecting with trust in God and that relationship with God.
For sure.
Right, but you can't be given that. That's something that you got to do, right? Meaning,
right, you got to work for it. You got to earn it.
You got to work for it. You can't be given a relationship with Hashem. You can be given the setup and the framework and the backgrounds, like the backgrounds, so that when you're ready, then you can sort of create it. But I don't think it's by accident. I think everybody has like that moment where they're just going to like either die or connect to Hashem, right? Or like their life is just going to fall apart, or going to. I mean, because I see
in
so
some
many
sense,
people,
12 steps is this, right?
Yeah.
12 steps. 12 steps was introduced as a framework for those addicts who couldn't get sober through traditional means at the time and needed a spiritual transformation.
Yeah.
And there's early letters from Carl Jung, the famous
psychologist,
with one of the founders of AA, I forget which one. I think Bill Wilson, who it was Bill W. and Dr. Bob. Those were the two guys who started AA. So I think it was Bill Wilson was communicating with Carl Jung while they were forming the 12 steps.
Yeah.
And Carl Jung said that there are certain addicts who he's seen unable to heal without a complete spiritual transformation and awakening. Yeah. And as part of that, as part of those communications, they developed the 12-step framework, the 12-step model, which is
There's
the
a higher
spiritual.
power.
So the higher power, God, turning
Yeah.
one's belief over to them, prayer, meditation,
Yes.
a life of service.
So this is right. So this is like they've broken it down into 12 steps, but I think that this is just what everybody that I know in my world is sort of just gravitating towards that way, towards just surrendering to Hashem's love as a means of healing and like creating that relationship of love with God.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's not really separate from the path of tshuva. Like the path of healing is not really separate from the path of tshuva. I think that it's scaring a lot of people now.
Yeah.
As, oh my goodness, what is going on? And they're doing this modality and that modality. And is it Avodah Zarah? Is it not Jewish? Is it whatever
right.
the thoughts are? But over and over, what I've seen is that people who engage with it in a serious way come back home in some fashion. It doesn't mean they become religious with a beard or in the same way,
They
but
become more spiritual,
more connected. And that relationship with a higher power and a very individual one.
Yeah.
Very individual one.
Yeah, that's why I think it's great. It doesn't scare me because I've done it and I'm in it and I see the spirit. I see how it's only created more spirituality and then more connectedness. And then it's not just like a hokey pokey spirituality like la da da. It like actually translates into wanting to have opportunities to be connected, even to connect to see the beauty then in halacha and to see the beauty, right? Because the naysayers will say that spirituality isn't Judaism if it doesn't have a halachic aspect to it, because right, if it's just like a feeling, right, you can't pass a feeling down from generation to generation. It needs to have a framework, but it leads people back towards, like what you just said about tshuva, it leads them back to their divine self, right? And that divine self wants to connect to the divine, and it wants to know, tell me more ways to connect to the divine. Okay, let's do more prayer. Let's do, let's like settle down and keep Shabbos and have a peaceful day together with my Creator. So it actually brings a lot of people back to halacha too, not just the idea, right? And it's funny that I'm even making the distinction of spiritual versus halacha, because halacha is spiritual. It's just contained, right? It has parameters, but it's all meant to.
Well, it certainly can often be stripped from it.
It can be totally stripped from it.
Right.
All of Judaism can be stripped of spirituality completely, right? So you can be a halachic Jew with no connection to God at all.
Right, the whole
and
body,
you can
no
be
soul.
spiritual and not keeping any of the, of the halacha. But I do believe that the healing modalities that are helping people return to themselves end up helping them return to a deeper connection with a Creator that translates on a practical level.
Right. Even though in the short term, and even not in the short term, it can extend for a while. It may, on the outside, look like a rejection of certain things.
Yeah.
Like sometimes people start healing and then they start dressing differently or shaving their beard or some other external aspect. But if they're doing that, in my opinion, it is because that thing wasn't true to them. Whatever that expression didn't feel true to them at the moment. So then eventually they return to something that feels incredibly true to them.
I see it all the time, to the point where I remember as a kid, like thinking it's so sad when people, stray and go off the derech and things like that. And, I still think that there's, a sadness that they couldn't find what they needed there. But it's like they're gonna find their connection with God, because God loves them enough. Right, God loves us enough to keep trying to connect to us, and so it might look messy and it might look sloppy, but a lot of people end up finding their way. He sets us up to help us come back, even if that means hitting rock bottom to come back. However it looks, but He sets us up. He wants He wants us to connect with Him. It's badly enough that He'll set it up for us to that we can find our way back. So it doesn't scare me as much when things start, when people start to stop looking the way they looked or stop dressing the way they looked, because it's part of a journey of MS, like you were saying, and of truth. And it might not be that this is my MS, but I'm rejecting something that didn't feel
right. And then eventually they find a way. And if
Right.
we trust that they're
right. So before we become for something, we have to be against something, right? So could be a long stage of against before that shifts, and it could look kind of messy or scary for people.
Yeah.
But
and I think it does have to become personal first. Like it says, Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu, which I understand that to mean is that before it becomes the God of our fathers, it has to become Elokeinu, our God.
Yeah, I like that.
And then from there we say, oh wow, this personal relationship that I have, my father had it too, and my grandfather had it too.
That's so cool. Like meaning, like I'm not just basing my relationship on God because of what my father taught me. It's Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu. Like I'm bringing my relationship with God actually is the integral piece of it. That's why we start with Elohim.
Yeah, the Rebbe has this teaching that every story we know from our forefathers, he talks about it, other Rebbes also, but every story that we know about our forefathers, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, are specific instructions to us as people. And it's not just a storybook. He often says that. The Torah is not a history book.
Right.
But it's not only the Torah stories, it's the Midrashic stories as well. Every story that we know about our forefathers is an instruction.
Right.
I think the term is like Maisa Ava Simla Bana.
Yeah.
Right? That the stories of our forefathers, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, are a sign for us. So one of the common stories is of Avram smashing the idols of his father.
Right.
Which, yes, his father was an idol worshiper, but if we don't smash the God of our father, then we're an idol worshiper too. Meaning if our only connection to a God is because our father had this God, then we're serving an idol too. That personal relationship was never developed.
Right, meaning he's not focusing so much on if the God is correct or wrong, but it's of the smashing. Like, meaning I got to find my own,
I think so, yeah. I think so. That's my understanding.
Yeah.
No, so I just want to be clear what the Rebbe says and what I'm adding.
Yeah.
So what the Rebbe says is that any story we know from our forefathers is an instruction to us.
Right.
That's it.
And you're taking,
then I'm saying that there's this story that exists that we know about Avram smashing the idols.
Right.
So I'm saying maybe it's not only Avram was had to smash the idols.
We're meant to be doing.
It's we're meant to smash the idols of our father, which the God of our father, which can be perfectly good for him, is not, there was no personal relationship developed with me.
Right.
So I need to engage in that process. When I engage in that process, then afterwards I can say, oh, wow, how did my father connect personally?
And it's just the permission to go and find your relationship with God or your paradigm of God, and that it could be it's almost like it's written in, writing the permission to go ahead and do that for people who are afraid to step out of what their father thought or believed.
Correct.
Right. And I think that's the idea, even like more simple, and maybe with Avram it's complicated because Terach was an idol worshiper, but just
it can also be read in the words of Lech Lecha,
that's what I was going to say, or Lech Lecha. Just go for yourself. Like you need to find
away from your father's home,
away from
your
your father's home, which is like, that's a little different than smashing the idols, but just like whatever your father's home is, go for yourself. And that's it. And I think that fathers might not be encouraging this. Right, there's a lot of fathers who say "my"
I think there's a lot of
the
fear.
highway. And
I think there's a lot of fear associated with it. There's
There's
a lot of fear associated with it.
Right.
And I think that's where trust comes in. Not trust in, I don't mean like trust in God. I mean trust in the individual. That, like, when we say a person is a piece of God, a Jew has a unique soul, or whatever we're saying in that sense, is that this person in his essence, if he taps into his essence, this woman, if she taps into her essence, is going to be aligned with God.
Yeah.
So keep encouraging them to tap into their essence.
That's what I believe. That's what I believe, and I've seen it over and over. Like every like the body will want to pull us down, right? The body's gravitational pull is downwards, but the soul's gravitational pull is upwards. And it's not like the body is just always right. There's always going to be that soul. Right, that's like the same way the body's pulling us to our base instincts and to the soul is always like right. The soul is trying to go back to its source always, right? And so we don't have to trust the human being. We can trust that the soul is trying to go upwards, and also trust that the way God created the world is a dynamic where there's we have the choice of at all times the game is right, or not in every single moment, but that the game is set up for success, right? It's rigged that like we have Bechira, but he like actually rigged in some extra pieces. Success. Yeah, he actually rigged in some parts, extra pieces of success, which are the ideas of hashgacha and him, tefillah. Right, in prayer, so we can help ourselves through prayer. So we're not just like left to our own devices of choosing right and wrong, choosing right and wrong. We actually have like superpowers, right? Where we can pray, God, like I'm going into a situation that might actually be bad for me, right, or bring me down, and please protect me, right? So it's not just me and my free will. It's me, my free will, and my prayer being answered and supported. And I don't know if you've felt that, like if you've ever ever actually just prayed for God to help you, I'm not talking about like in business or in life, but actually help you make the right choice, and you felt like an extra support. I've felt it, I feel it all the time. Like just, God just like, do this with me, help me do this, and like knowing that He's going to be there, right? So it's rigged in our favor, right? So when we look at people who might be off or whatever, there's the neshama always trying to connect with its source, and there's special mechanisms in place to help us out.
Right. I think what's scary for some is that as people start touching their essence, it is going to look very unique.
Yeah.
So you are going to end up with
it's going to look wacky. We're not going to all look like the same.
Exactly.
Right?
We're not going to look the same.
We're not going to all look the same. Like that was something that was like just created as a mold or as a model that never existed until, I don't know,
It's probably very recent. It has to be very recent.
It for sure didn't exist before the 1800s, right? And so with 1800s, every Jew looked just how they looked. Right, there was no uniform, there was no uniform look or anything like that. And so people, if you look at these healing retreats and you look at the pictures, the people are going to look whack, and that's it.
Right,
and
but they, I have a friend, Mayor Kay and I, we lead retreats, and
Mayor.
It's a smorgasbord of people for sure. Obviously, Jewish and men, and coming from or connected to in some way, 90% of the time. 95% of the time to religious background, wherever they are now. But there is a unity that's really felt, deeply felt at the end of all of these retreats, regardless of how they all look and where they are.
I was going to say that too. So I've been running retreats also. We did about 4 this year.
Neat.
And it was, when I first started, I was thinking like all these people, most of the people who are being drawn to a healing retreat probably had a really rough childhood. And my guess was, I wonder what their relationship. My question was, I wonder what their relationship with God is, based on the fact that they had a really rough childhood. They're coming to a retreat. Like all of them really good. Like they all some had fear and some had some anger, but like there wasn't like the overall feeling on the retreat was actually really spiritual every single time, right? And it shouldn't have surprised me, because I see that with my clients, even the ones who had the hardest childhoods. There's like that connection to Hashem, but it surprised me on the retreat, and it was cool. It is cool. Do you find that too? That there's like a
We often have a good amount of resistance to it, and there's always. Not always, but there's often some tension around a minyan, and are people going to be pulled in or not?
I'm not talking about halacha.
Discuss that.
I'm not.
So we don't. Right. It's not too much of it.
Yeah.
But I'm saying even just that. Yeah. Right. So there often is some tension around it, or there's the opportunity to. We try to address it early on to avoid any of that, but. By and large, with a little conversation, people are certainly very open to it. Yeah. But we have dealt with a fair amount of religious trauma. Yeah. My understanding of religious trauma today, if just having seen a number of people, specifically through the retreats, seeing this pattern over and over, express it the same way, is that they felt, either from their parents or from religious figures, that individually they were not important to their parents or teachers. Yeah. And what was important was that they did this and this function. That was more important to them as individuals.
It's interesting that it's interesting that we're calling that religious trauma. I think that's the right word, but I think that it does a disservice to what religion's actually supposed to be, because it's really like a misconstruing of religion, right? And so parents who are saying your needs don't matter, just do what you're supposed to, or schools that are saying your needs don't matter, just do what you're supposed to. They're not actually acting from it might look like they're acting, and they might be religious figures, and they might have the beard, and they might look like they know what they're talking about. They might be very, very learned, but they're often, and also like parents who reject any little stripe outside the line or whatever it is. That's not coming from a religious place. That's coming from a fear-based
100%.
Fear-based place, right? And so it's fear-based parenting and fear-based chinuch that now is getting the title, is getting the title of religious trauma, and it's sad because it's not.
But there's a reason why.
Yeah, it's well, okay. I would love to hear what you say about it, but it's not right. Meaning, like my dad always used to tell people when he was doing kiruv, like, don't judge Judaism by the Jews, right? So don't judge God by fear-based religious teachers.
Of course.
Right,
And that's,
right.
as you're taking someone through that process, you want to say to them is that this message that you got from a person about God
Right.
says more about the person than it does about God.
And let's
Right.
try to see where he was coming from. What was his upbringing? How many times did he get whacked on the butt when he did the wrong thing? Or, meaning let's
Right, but that's
see
exactly
him
what
as
I'm
a
saying.
person, not let's not see him as a representative of God, but actually a learned person who had fear-based chinuch himself, or has fears of Gehenim, or fear of Virsa, or whatever it is, that have nothing to do with
Right, but that
God.
takes work to work through.
To parse out. Right.
Yeah. So when you have a child and they have a authority figure, whether it's a parent or a teacher or someone else that's in that role,
Yeah.
and they deliver a message,
Yeah.
and then they say it in the name of God,
Right.
The
and
children-
that's a person that you trust.
exactly. So the child takes it on
Yeah.
at this person's
I'm
word
not
that
denying
this is
that
what God
reality.
wants.
It's just sad that that
called
becomes
religious trauma.
That
And this
and
is
it's
the
right
definition.
word. It's just a sad word because it has nothing to do with actual religion.
Right, but I'll push further on this because, like, when someone says Chilul Hashem,
Yeah.
right? So desecration of God's name. Are they actually desecrating God's name? What does that mean? God is who He is. How can you? God is His name. Like, how do you desecrate God's name? It just means that someone's speaking in God's name
Right.
and lowering the idea of God
Right.
in that person's mind.
Right.
Not that God has changed.
Right.
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 So meaning the same
God
way we
doesn't
can
change.
say religious trauma, we can
Right.
say Chil Hashem, a desecration of God's
Right.
name.
Right.
Which to me, this is the height of Chil Hashem, desecration of God's name, is when an authority figure communicates a hurtful idea to a child in the name of God. Meaning if the parent just said, don't do it because of X,
Right.
any other reason but
Right.
God,
Right.
then the child could go
Have
on
a
his
lot of
merry way.
Right, and have a lot of clarity that this was.
This
my
was not
parents.
God. This
Right,
was my
right.
parent or some
Right.
other idea, whoever they
Right.
wanted to blame it on. You can
Right.
blame it on American society, you can blame it on health, you can blame it on
Right. Except
whatever you want.
Except
Once you
for-
say God,
Right.
so now the child believes that this was God.
Except for what you mentioned before, is that even if the parents leave God out of it and they just are, harsh, or they just are worried about neighbors or worried about whatever it is, right? What you said before it actually comes to play, which is that the way you oftentimes are parented ends up being your relationship with God, whether it was explicit or implicit.
Yes, in some- yes.
anyway. So there's, so there's that to contend with, which is, that ends up being its own, religious
Certainly, yes.
trauma, covert religious trauma. It's not overt because no one's saying
Right,
God,
100%.
God is this, but it's it ends up leaving that impression anyway. But I always come back to, this is not tragic. This is intentional. This is our generation's work. This is like almost like a message of hope. And it could be I'm just saying this to myself because I do see a lot of pain and and heaviness and all of that. Is that we really are collectively healing, and this is not by accident. We're, for whatever reason, these neshamas that are in this generation dealing with all the chaos of this, of the Holocaust, but also everything, just kids growing up with iPhones and this and that, and right, all the things that we say that are so tragic or so hard or so sad or whatever. Here we are doing it. Right, and so it's not by accident. It's nobody's fault. God designed it this way, and we were chosen, I think, to do this work. And I think I don't remember which source said it, but it's the idea of if you take the whole Torah and you condense it into like 7 ideas, and then you condense it down into one idea, like that one idea would be trusting God. Like if there's one thing that we're meant to be on this earth for, it's to actually have create trust in God and just surrender to trusting Him, which we would never surrender to anybody unless we knew they loved us and were going to do right by us, right? So there's that idea of trust, and then there's also the idea of tikkun hamidot, which is people think of as correcting our character traits, right? But our midot are really, the different emotions that are getting triggered, right? That the core wounds, right, and the emotions that got triggered, right? And so it's not like, oh my God, I have so much healing to do before I start my life, or why did I have such a rough childhood? I have so many, I have to do so many years of therapy. This is what we're here for.
It's all of it.
This is what we came for.
Yeah, it's not ending.
This is what you came for. Like it's not by accident. It's not an interruption of our otherwise, otherwise life. Like this is right. This is like there's value to what we're doing on a neshama level. That was like it's not like, oh my God, if only I would have had these parents, or not have had that experience, or not have had that addiction, or not have had that marriage, everything would be so amazing right now. It's literally designed perfectly for us, and it's life. Like this is what we're meant to be doing. This is what else are we doing here?
Yeah, Dov Pinson has a book on tshuva. I forget what it's called.
Yeah.
And in it he says, transformation takes a lifetime. That is why we have a lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. This is what we're doing here. This is what we came for. And it could look like, oh, my parents, my spouse, my this, my that, but it's all just, opportunities to grow, right? It's all opportunities to grow. Like, how will I grow? How else will I become like the best version of myself? Like, most people wouldn't do it by choice.
Yes, I think that one of the gifts of having parents who we, aren't okay with in some way, or weren't okay with in childhood, is that it compels us to search for a true relationship with a true father, God, or a true relationship with a true mother, with God, right? That journey is set for us, where we say, okay, I was disappointed here, so let me go looking for one that's better.
Yeah.
I don't know who I heard this from, but the Baal Shem Tov was an orphan, right? He didn't have a mother or a father growing up. And someone connected those two things, meaning he became the Baal Shem Tov because he didn't have parents, so he went searching.
Right.
Had he had a human being to play the role of God in his life, right? Because children certainly turn their parents into their higher power.
Right.
At least one of them, if not both of them.
Right.
But he didn't have that.
Right.
So he had to
really
turn
had
to,
Right,
he had to turn to God.
Right. I wonder if there's a parallel there with Avram Avinu and Terach, and because he was
Right,
the one who
maybe.
first actually thought about God in a moral, not just as a creator, but brought morality into the world too. So I wonder if, I don't know, have to flesh that idea out a little bit.
Right, maybe.
More, yeah.
I don't remember who I heard it from. I wanted to continue your story a little bit, kind of just take me from where you were in your story growing up to how you got into weight loss work specifically.
Okay, so first, so the fast track is I actually always wanted to be a therapist, and my parents discouraged me from it. They said that I'm just going to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders, and it's not a great way to make a living. And so I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I still got my degree in psychology, and then I ended up getting a job as in a resource room in a school, and so that led me to get my master's in education and special ed, just so that I'd be able to build the government and do my thing and make money, and so that was like the earlier version of me. And I guess I could say it was okay. It wasn't my calling or my passion, but I put my heart and soul into everything I do. I did that for about 12 years. At the same time, I got married, and we moved to Staten Island, where my husband was an assistant rabbi in more on the outskirts, by the mall. And so he was being an assistant rabbi. I was being what I described to you before, the wife of a rabbi who was kind of just not having a relationship with God and feeling just keep me out of the way, and I'll just do what I got to do, but kind of disconnected, I would say. And the fact that we were living in an out of town community that didn't have a lot of support, or we were the shiurim, we were the, me and my husband, but I didn't have a lot of support. It actually was rough for me, and I had thank God 5 kids in 7 years. So I was raising my children and teaching and trying to figure out why I wasn't so happy. Right? And I think that, the unhappiness on the outside looked like it was my marriage or, things like that. But I think that it was because I was not happy internally and not having a relationship with God. Anyway, my kids started to get a little bit older, and they started to reach the age of my students, who were 1st through 6th grade. And I was spending my whole day working with, groups of, 1st through 6th graders, and I was coming home and doing that at home, and it was something's got to give. I need some adults, this. And I didn't have a lot of adults around me either. I was starting to really lose it. I just was not happy, even though, thank God, I was, doing well. So I was career change. That was it. Gave notice, and I shifted gears, and I was what am I interested in now? So I'd been passionate about helping people lose weight in a healthy, normal, balanced manner. I skipped the whole part where I talk about the idea that when I was younger, when I was in 7th, 8th grade, I got to this height, so you can't see me standing, but I'm about 5'9", and I was kind of uncomfortable in my skin, and Then I also was very athletic, and so I'd work out a lot, and then I'd eat a lot, and then I'd bulk up, and I just kind of felt like awkward and oversized, and and like didn't fit in with other people. And so I started going on diets, and none of them were good. They were all like stupid and terrible and awful. And I started to really understand the cycle of like the starving, and then the cutting out food groups, and then the mess, and then starting to like sneak a little bit in of I started to really relate to like disordered eating patterns. And thank God, like I found my way pretty quickly. I found like a better way that worked, and that was not restrictive, and that wasn't actually a diet, and that you just kind of eat in balanced in moderation and don't deprive yourself. And I started to think. So as I was navigating out of the teaching position, I was like, oh, I really like coaching people and helping them not go into this dysfunctional diet programs. And like, I'm going to start a weight loss coaching program that's like actually works and normal, whatever. And right around that same time, there was an opportunity for a weight loss coach. So somebody actually hired me for that position. We did a little bit of training. She hired me, and thank God it just really took off, got a huge clientele. I started to open a bunch of different locations, and I would still see clients, but I'd also hire people and manage them. And, we created like a really big network, like an operation. And I was there for a bunch of years, but as I was there, I started realizing that our approach, which was like even this normal, balanced, healthy approach, really wasn't always working, because my clients were struggling with something deeper. And so it wasn't about the food at all. So it didn't matter. It wasn't about like, my original understanding was that the diet cycle itself creates shame and guilt and backlash, right? The understanding that I started to, I think I knew, but I started to really know, was that this wasn't about food. The food was just the
symptom, the manifestation.
Yeah, food was the solution. This was totally not about food. And so even while I was still working with that company, I started to kind of explore deeper work, and like, where is this coming? Just kind of like what's coming up for you, and the emotion. You can call it emotional eating, but it's really deeper than that, because it's really even emotional eating just. It's like a simple term, but for something a lot of times deeper. But then there's like the binge eating, where I'm totally going disembodied, and like the addictive, it feels almost like compulsive and all that. So I started to really explore that and understand that a little better. And ultimately, when I left my old job and I opened my own practice, my goal was, I'm only going to do the deeper work of just whatever's behind the food, and the food is just going to be like the entry point. Like, okay, I know, right? Why do people go seek help? Either because they're doing something that they don't want to be doing, or they're not doing something that they do want to be doing, or some combination of those two, right? So food could be like a great little niche that people come in, and then we'll go and explore the deeper work, and that's what happened. And then and then what ended up happening is people started coming without the food struggles. It could be with addiction struggles, or it could be with relationship or business troubles. But
got it. Okay, so you just went broader.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So and then even in the last couple of years, I've been just learning about just the inner world of people, and the spiritual side of it, and the medicine side of it, and the healing side of it, and the energy side of it. And I just I feel like it's almost taken me down a rabbit hole, but like a good rabbit hole, where I just keep learning about more and more things. I have to learn more, because I can't help my clients if I don't know. And so I have to learn different modalities, and I have to explore plant medicine, and I have to explore energy thing. I don't have to be the expert in all these things, but I have to know that they exist, so that because different things work for different people at different times, and I have to
understand
educate myself. So thank God that's how that evolved.
Okay, thanks for painting that picture. You asked before we hit the record button how I met Galia. Yeah, Galia Fenster. So I'd heard his name a couple of times, but I didn't know who he was. I imagined a rabbi with a big beard. Just Galia Fenster. I heard he gives talks and things like that. At some point in time, I was right
like
after.
Fenster's like a good name, like Fensterheim. Like it could be like a beard, right?
I heard he's the guy who gives shirim.
Right.
So I was, it was like just before Rosh Hashanah, and my wife and I were going on vacation. So we're in the airport, and this guy comes over to me, and he says, "Are you the guy who did the TED Talk on porn addiction?" And I said, "Yeah." So he said, "Hi, I'm Galia Fenster." So Matt, I said, "Oh, I heard of you. I didn't imagine you would look this way."
He recognized you.
Yeah, I said, "I imagine you to look this way." Ooh. So we chat a little bit, we exchange numbers, and turns out our offices are very close to each other, at least at the time. I don't know where he is now. So we met up, we spoke a little bit, we got to know each other, and then once I got doing this podcast, I
that's really cool.
reached out to him.
So he actually pointed you out in the airport, and then you just kept in touch.
Kind of kept in touch since at different points in time. You know, we did some things together at his addiction clinic, etc.
Yeah.
But
I think
also it's been cool to meet someone else who's doing something similarly in terms of being in the business world and you know, wanting financial success and abundance, and at the same point in time serving a life of service, and that combination was very nice for.
I think that's what drew me to Galia originally, and it drew me here too. But I think what drew me to Galia was that he wasn't a rabbi, and so it was very easy to listen to for me, you know, because and it's funny because my children had different experience, which I'll say, but you know, for me, because I had so much resistance and because I had felt so much like not aligned and not connected, so anything that like felt like some of that, it was like I don't want to hear, you know, anything that felt like it was coming from the, you know, from like this top down kind of approach. I wasn't open to. And then I think I actually saw him on the cover of an Ami or something like that, and it was like, you know, Eli Fenster teaching Torah or whatever, and I was like, oh, cool, like this is a guy who's in shape and looks good and is successful and is, you know, and is really changing the world. And that's actually when I started listening. It was first I saw him on the cover of the business section of the Ami, I think, which was or around the time. And I think that for some people that's, you know, and then I found some other mentors also who were just less, you know, just like off the beaten path, and they were doing things their own way, but they were connected spiritually, and I was like, oh, cool, like I could, you know, be myself and connect, you know, and connect spiritually. So it's been cool, and I have a lot of respect for this model of like, you know, making money and doing business, but impacting people, and, you know, living a life of service, and like using everything that you have as a vessel to have the capacity or the ability, and people will listen, right? People listen more when there's somebody who's, you know, successful behind the.
I think that the Alter Rebbe used to give people blessings to Baal Tanya. Yeah. He used to give people blessings saying, God should give you gashmias, God should give you physical stuff, and you should make from the physical spiritual. Yeah.
So, I mean, isn't that what we're supposed to do? Like, wasn't Yaakov? I believe so. Yaakov was blessed. Yaakov didn't just get the spiritual. Yaakov got the brachos. Like he got the bracha of physical abundance. Like.
So I don't know what we're supposed to do, because there are definitely rabbis who've taken a very different approach to it, right? Than more of an aesthetic lifestyle, and one that removes. But it wasn't the Chabad way, and it wasn't the way that I was. I
think that there's a certain. My understanding of that aesthetic lifestyle is that it's an actual preference. And I used to not think this way. It used to confuse me, that aesthetic lifestyle, because I thought we're supposed to take the physical and elevate it. I thought that was literally the way what Jews are meant to do. Or I wanted to think that, right? But then you'd see people living these kind of like, you know, simple or austere or impoverished lives. So, then I had this thought that like there's a level, and you might not relate to this, I don't know, but like there's a level of gashmias that I want, right? But there's a level that like I really don't want. Like I could imagine how that would just like be too much, and it would be sucking in, and right. And so I feel like these people are in such a spiritual level that even just having like, I don't know, furniture is just, to them, it's getting to, it's meaning it's because they literally don't want it. Like it's not because God, right? It's not because they don't believe that we have the bracha of abundance. It's because like that level of gashmias.
That's their preference.
It's their preference. Like the level of gashmias, right? The same way there's a level of gashmias that says like, no, I don't want the designer bags. I don't want the, you know, it just doesn't speak. Right. It doesn't speak to me. I don't want to think that. I don't want to be involved in that. I think that's what they're doing. It could be.
I had a period. I probably never said this publicly, but I had a period where I fantasized about poverty.
Yeah.
I felt like I was, I don't know, like imprisoned in some way. There was no way out for me.
Right.
I was in business. I couldn't get out of it without being in a ton of debt. Like I couldn't just give it to someone. Yeah. Right. There's a moving machine.
Yeah.
And I used to see people riding on a bus, and I wanted their life.
Totally, I had the same thing. No, I used to think like I could totally be homeless and just live like like in a mattress somewhere like that. And I think that's like the fantasy of just like escaping all the stress and pressures that come along with it. The stress and pressures that come along with life. Right, let's just go be homeless. But maybe I don't know.
Maybe.
I remember thinking those thoughts, but I don't remember exactly which place inside of me it was.
But it is an interesting way to think about it. That someone who's living an ascetic lifestyle is choosing a preference.
That's what I think. That's what I think, because I really do. If you look at every Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, like the abundance, shefa, right? Like it doesn't mean that they pigged out all day or they indulged in it all day, but like the bracha was there, right? The bracha of shefa was there. I think tell me what you think about this insight. I'm totally just rattling it off to you. I think that we all have abundance already, and but most people, and I don't want to like include everybody, but I think that most people feel pretty broke. So the average, I'm not talking about like, right? Most people who are paying a couple of tuitions or a bunch of tuitions, and they're marrying off kids, or they're sending their kids to camp, and the braces and the this and the that, right? They have a decent amount of abundance, and they also feel broke all the time, right? And I think that that's also like purposeful, right? Meaning the bracha is there, right? Because even if you're not comparing yourself to the 1%ers, but compare yourself to the other 7 billion people on the planet, right? Heat, electricity, car, food, gas, cell phone, right? You've got all the food on your table, food in the fridge for many people. And again, I'm not taking away from people who are struggling with poverty, but I think that many people are, they're making $250 and they need $3, or they're making $3 and they need $350, or they're right. And so there's plenty of abundance, but they're always feeling short. And I think that piece is like, you don't want to be abundant and forget about God. You want to it's almost like intentional. It's like, I'm going to give you the bracha, and I'm going to give you and again, I don't know if this is real or not, but tell me if this resonates. I'm going to give you the bracha, and I'm going to give you it, but like but you're going to just feel money stress, and you're going to feel money anxiety, so that you're going to turn to me, and we'll have a relationship the same way God gives people all different challenges, so that he'll turn to them. It's like you'll have it, but you won't feel it.
Right, so I'll bookend the conversation for us. We started the conversation talking about the dynamic between...
Is that garbage what I just said? Or
I'm going to bookend it. I'm going to say... So we started the conversation talking about the masculine and feminine dynamic.
Yeah.
So there are many metaphors for the relationship between God and man, God and people. And one of it is husband and wife, right? God being the man and us being the wife. So in that dynamic, right, God is giving us... And if we're rejecting, if we're not receptive,
I like what you
then
just did there. Then it cuts it off.
It cuts it off, in some way.
Or to say it on the better way, like to keep the relationship going. There's like a little bit of like that strain of that push and pull. But we for sure block abundance by being ungrateful, or it's the same parallel with God. But I think that just from God's angle, like He has a vested interest in having a relationship with us, so he doesn't want us to be like the snake, like where you just give you whatever you need so you can go, right? So it's like you're going to have abundance, but we're still going to have a relationship where you have to ask and all that. I also think that it's interesting that people will say like, "Oh, Hashem is so good to me," but my husband's so bad to me. But meaning like we say like, "Oh, Hashem loves me. He's so good to me. He takes such good care of me. Thank you, Hashem." And people make a big idea about making an effort to do that, but then they'll complain about their spouse where they're being two-faced because God gave you your spouse, right? And so either you really appreciate God and everything that he gave you, including your spouse, or you're lying to God and you're just trying to manipulate him into giving you stuff, right? And so if you really have that gratitude towards God and that you believe he's good to you, then you believe that this, and again, I'm not talking about an abusive situation or, a dangerous situation or, anything like that, but just the average relationship, where I say I appreciate God, but then I complain to my husband all the time, or I criticize my husband all the time. So as women, or at least for myself, we got to get that together, which is right. Appreciate God and appreciate our husbands, right? And less criticizing, more appreciating, and getting that flow.
Getting
cycling.
that flow going.
Yeah, cycling.
Yeah, I hear that.
Down the shefa.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like having a lot of physicality, it definitely is. like there's more that needs to be made spiritual, right? There's more.
Yeah. It's also, I mean,
There's more risk. I say
I'm
it's a test.
I'm not at the level, so, but right, but I would imagine that it becomes more challenging because it could be more distracting.
Rabbeinu Bechaya and Chavis Halavavis, right?
Yeah.
About bitachon, shar bitachon. He says that someone who doesn't have as much money should thank God that he's not in a place where he can make as many mistakes, because the more money someone has, then the more things they have to do, whether it's to give charity or help their parents or help their family members or spend it wisely or not misuse it, whatever it is, right? There's more, not wasted, baltashkas. There's so many things that...
The tests are just more and bigger.
There are more. So to thank God for protecting them from
and they,
not having to
maybe
make
more far-reaching or bigger impact on the test. Like if you do make a mistake and there's bigger numbers involved, it's more far-reaching and more, right?
Yeah, it's similar to what I was saying before about, being in business and at some point wanting off the train.
Right.
And there was nowhere to go.
I can't.
Right. There was nowhere to go. I mean, I can go, but then I'll be in millions of dollars of debt or more,
Right.
So it was essentially choiceless.
Right. But even something like that, like it's so cool to me to see like, I don't know where you're at with that kind of way of thinking.
No, I'm not there now. No.
Yeah, but in general, when people have business stress, right? So the idea is like this bitachon hishtadlus thing, but like business is actually a perfect playground for bitachon, right? And for working on our stress, right? Meaning you'll have 10 opportunities, somebody who's in it and working in this, right? And working, they're just their normal job, whatever it is, whether it's high level, low level, lots of money, little money, right? It looks like work, but it's actually a playground for trusting, especially if you're self-employed, right?
Yeah, I think the two best playgrounds for working on oneself, it's not a therapist's couch, it's not even a psychedelic journey.
Home life and work.
Yeah, it's marriage and work, yeah.
Right. So that's why I don't even, like when people ask me like how much hishtadlus versus how much bitachon, I'm like, dude, it's all bitachon, right? It's all bitachon, because in your hishtadlus, you know how much bitachon you're going to have about closing that deal, or if that deal didn't go through, or if that deal is supposed to go through, and if you're hoping, right? It's all opportunities to to bitachon it and actually level up in your bitachon, right? It's not fake, right? Meaning these challenges, if you've overcome them and you succeed them, either by like finding your place of faith or trusting, or if it doesn't go through, or it doesn't work out how you intended, finding your place of faith, that's like massive leveling up, right?
I'd say most of the work I was forced to do as an adult was because of financial and business stress.
Yeah, and it elevate, and you found it's either sink or swim, right? Like you had to elevate.
Yeah, I mean, the Rebbe says about financial stress that it's similar to the mabul.
Yeah.
Right. One of the terms for the mabul is mei nayach, right? The waters of nayach, which can be understood in two ways: the waters of the person nayach, but also the waters of comfort.
Peace.
That these overwhelming waters, the waters of the mabul, could bring comfort in one way. In what way is that if the state we should be in is peace and tranquility.
Right.
Oftentimes we realize from our business affairs that we're not in a state of peace and tranquility.
Right.
So it's an opportunity to clean out those things that are getting in the way of peace and tranquility.
So taking the mabul and making it into mei noach, taking the mabul that you're being hit with, and transforming it into noach, to inner peace.
Exactly.
Peace.
Right. That's the opportunity that exists. If someone is saying, for example, that they can only feel peace and tranquility if they have, let's say, $1 million in savings.
Yeah.
Then they don't have peace and tranquility.
Yeah.
Right? They have the absence of it were it not for $1 million in savings.
Right.
So.
Which means they won't have it at $1 million.
Exactly. Means they don't truly have it.
Right. And they won't have it at $1 million.
They have it as much as they have $1 million, which is how much does someone have that? It can get lost. It can be inflated away. Like there can be all sorts of things can happen to it. So someone doesn't truly have the peace and tranquility.
Yes.
They have the temporary benefit of this $1 million while they have it, if they have it.
It's a take on the idea of money won't buy happiness, but money won't buy peace of mind.
But we're going further than that. We're saying that the stress that comes up around it brings to the surface those things that are blocking us from peace and tranquility.
Right.
And if we dive into it, we can move those away so we can feel peace and tranquility.
Right. That's a perfect playground. And this is, I tell my son, he's just starting to actually, I shouldn't say he's just starting. He's been in the work field for a couple of years. He's turning 20 now. He's doing property management and stuff. And we discussed this, how when things go really badly and everything goes wrong, or this whatever it is, right? we could talk about faith versus, right, stress versus faith, right? Where are you on the fear faith
Yes.
continuum and stuff like that? But really also, like, you're creating the vessel, right, for yourself to level up. Like, his goal is to, be multi-millionaire and own the islands.
Amen.
And, and all that. And, all right. And so if I get messed up, if I get in a bad mood because of like these inconveniences of this, property management job, then I don't have, right, then I have work to do to create the vessels to bring more abundance,
Yes.
right? So seeing this as a playground, right? So it's not like, oh my God, like nothing's working out, da da da. It's helping create you. It's helping create you as a vessel, right? So to be able you can't handle multi-million-dollar pressure if you can't handle, $100,000 pressure, right? And it's God preparing you. Right, it's just God preparing you, and I see that with all our, I try to see it that way with all the challenges. Right, when I get annoyed now, I try to think, oh my God, if I'm working on patience. Not why am I being tested with patience? Literally the opposite. God's putting annoyances and frustrations in my way so that I have opportunities to practice. So then, how else am I going to become more patient or more loving,
Right,
or whatever
100%.
it is? Right, so seeing it that
Yeah,
way.
it hit me like a ton of bricks a couple years ago when I realized that when they're saying to make a keli for parnasa, right, to make a vessel for abundance or for money,
Right.
it's not talking about the business; it's talking about the individual.
Yes. right. Not
For
to
us
set
to
up,
become
not to
that.
set up systems, right? Not to set up
It's
processes.
not a
and
business.
systems.
It's me.
Right,
It's me.
Right.
Could I handle it?
Can I be the keli? Will I stay in faith? Will I stay in humble? Will I stay in
Yeah.
humility? Will I stay in calmness? Will I be generosity? Right? It's not like, well, let's find out. Let's create
And you
it.
see practically, there's a lot of people who make money
Right.
don't. The skill of making money is very different than the skill of keeping money.
Yeah.
I mean, you see with athletes, for
Yeah.
example, who make a
Right.
tremendous amount of money,
Right.
but they never build the fortitude.
Right. So they have
retain
their
it.
kalim to build, right? Or everybody has their
Yeah.
But everybody has their specific kalim to build, right? So if I might become gaiva, I might become full of gaiva. Somebody else might become full of stress. Someone else might become full of I don't know, just get pulled by the physicality and leave
Yeah,
God out
not
of
be
it.
able to manage it.
Right,
They could
right.
be getting mishalachim knocking on the doors all
Right.
day long for tzedakah, and they can't
Right.
say no. They don't know how to.
Right, or
They
not
can't
be
set
able to
boundaries.
say no, and then
Yeah.
maybe get resentful, right? So it's like wherever I am now, like, so if we're looking to bring more abundant, right? If we trust the premise that God wants us to be rich and God wants to give us abundance, and if somebody listening out there feels like they're not manifesting, like they're not having shefa, so the two things that I think we talked about is, number one is, are we blocking it anywhere, like in the husband-wife relationship or
Right.
the God relationship? But also, am I there yet as a vessel? Am I there, right? God's not going to just dump. He loves us too much to just dump it on us and crush us.
Right, often won't help.
Did I create? Right? No, he won't. He wouldn't. He's not going to do that to us. Right?
Yeah, we wouldn't do it to our child. I mean,
Right,
I don't.
right. We wouldn't do it to our child. So he's trying to prepare you. So pay attention, right? And pay attention to what might go wrong if you had all that shefa.
Yeah,
and
you
what-
have someone
what
like
might I
Warren
need to
Buffett.
build.
He talks
Yeah.
about leaving
Yeah.
a couple $1 million for his children.
Right.
Nothing like.
Right. Nothing
the billions
crazy.
he's made.
Right. Meaning not ruining them with money.
That's the way he would see it.
Right.
Right. Because it takes.
Right. And so, but I think it always has to go back to the premise of A, God loves us, right? Because a lot of people are struggling financially. So A, God loves you. B, we did get the bracha. Yaakov did get the bracha of gashmias and financial success. So if in my personal life there's some blockage, it might be from
Right, so what's in the
one
way?
of these things. Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Clear.
Yeah. Cool stuff.
Okay, so if someone hears this and is interested in working with you, how do they go about that?
Yeah, cool. Okay, so 347-938-9113. That's my phone number. I actually respond to everybody who reaches out eventually. But you can reach me directly, or you can go to my website, which is mybkcoaching.com.
mybkcoaching.com.
mybkcoaching.com, or you could bother Ellie. I'm just kidding. You can ask him how to find me.
No, we'll do our
yeah.
best to put it in the show
yeah.
notes wherever.
Yeah, and also
Wherever someone is listening
I
to
don't
this.
want listeners also to feel like they only can reach out if they want to sign up for coaching. I'm happy to communicate with people. I try to be very generous with my time. It doesn't mean I'll coach people endlessly for free, but if somebody has something that's on their mind that they just want to chat out, or they can just text me and we'll make up a time to have a conversation. no charge. I don't want
Okay.
I don't want people to feel like, you know, they like any resistance at all. Like I try to help people.
Right.
That's something that I'm passionate about.
We'll see if that's sustainable. You know, I used to do that before the podcast.
Yeah.
And then it became completely unsustainable since the podcast.
Oh, you think you have way more followers than me? I think you have like
Right, I'm saying, but you're on this.
Yeah.
So you're on this. I don't know how many I have or not, but it just
Thank
became
God, it's growing. It's
unsustainable.
big.
Maybe I don't have that much time.
I don't have tons of time in my day, but I also carve out time for just talking to people.
And then what I said to God, I said, God, if you want me to help anyone, please send them through Adama's doors.
Yeah.
And we'll make it work. Like if someone, you know, financially needs some help with it or something else,
Right.
we'll make it work. But please use that. I've opened this door that exists.
Yeah.
Send them through that door
Yeah.
so that if I'm meant to help them, if I'm meant to be helped
right.
through me thinking I'm helping them.
Also,
Then send-
also, it's such a cool thing that you just said.
then send them through that door because the phone was getting too
right.
too overwhelming.
Yeah.
But for the
Also,
meantime,
don't
I
call,
appreciate it.
text, and then we'll set up a time to, to chat, and we'll figure it out. I run a little bit of a communistic approach to my coaching, which is like I charge a lot to my clients, but it also allows me a lot of, it also allows me space to help people. Like in my free, and I almost like micer time to be able to just answer people, and approach people. So there's a little bit of like I guess you can call it like tzedakah or communistic kind of approach there that works for me and my clients. Hopefully.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, and I hope
thank you so much for having
you'll
me
benefit a
here.
lot from this.
And hopefully people will
conversation.
benefit. And I must say this because whenever we talk generalities, there's always like somebody in the audience who's like hurt, and so I see you. I'm not, this. If something we said was, if someone's struggling with something and you feel like you were blamed or victimized, or if you feel like, that doesn't apply to me, or what are you talking about, or whatever, I wasn't talking to you, and I feel you. And I think it's important to say that because people hear things and they're like, oh, you don't get it. I'm broke, or you don't get it. My husband's a monster, or my parents were, horribly abusive, and I don't want this to cause anybody pain.
Yeah, I think when people first hear it, it can sound like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if we breathe into the message, it's actually very empowering.
Yeah.
It's that no one else needs to change for us to change our life. And I think that many of us who've embarked on a healing journey in a real determined way have seen that it's true.
Yeah.
That we can change.
Yeah.
And somehow the
things
world around us
transform,
changes.
And the world transforms. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And the people who are vibrating at a different frequency sort of just aren't there. And
Somehow things change.
Either they elevate or they sort of drift away somehow, or they change. It's magic. I've seen it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not a blaming. It's not putting someone down. It's actually empowering someone.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we made that clear. I hope we did. So
Right.
That's there. We'll put
Okay.
that out there. All
Good.
right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Good one.